Hi, my name is Andreas Rennet. I am co-founder of Sustamize. Sustamize is a company which was founded to create a database with CO2 references to enable companies to analyze the carbon footprint as transparency for the impact of their emissions. The database is a dynamic database which is allowing to simulate the impact of the CO2 improvement of products. And these data are used for Tset, for example, in the background, that besides the cost calculation, the CO2 footprint can be calculated automatically and with a high accuracy. And Sustamize as a company is providing those data to Tset in the background, and we are working on an every year update, and we are focusing on covering most of the materials and processes in automotive. Sustamize is certified based on how we are collecting the data and how we are calculating the CO2 data. It's necessary because if you calculate the CO2 footprint, you need to prove that the data are following different rules, like the ISO 14067. And we have a very transparent way of how we collect data from the industry, from studies, but we also calculate own CO2 data to provide a very accurate and a very transparent way of the data based on the certification. At the moment, Tset is using our data in a way that we're providing the data as reference data like cost data, so they're besides the cost data. And we are aiming now to enable to use our data also in a dynamic way, so we can approach our data also with APIs to make simulations, which will be the next step. At the moment, the data are used basically like cost data in a yearly update base, and we can provide additional data on demand whenever Tset is needed and want to improve and increase the data. The main target of what the customer is gaining is, first of all, the transparency. Getting a very simple way to get a full transparency of a footprint of a system, like an inverter, like a complete car. The main gain at the end is the question of how can I prove the CO2 footprint? And that's basically a bigger gain if I want to check what is if I'm changing material, what is if I'm changing processes and energies, how can I reduce the CO2 footprint? Very nice impact is if you use the data and you start with a current system, a current car system, for example, or body in white, and you have your transparency of the current solution, and you're requesting what happens if I'm changing the material, for example, to a higher degree of recycling rate, then I'm able to simulate the impact on cost and on CO2. So basically what you can answer is the question, how much is the cost, the CO2 reduction, cost per kilo CO2 reduction on a system. Most important thing for CO2 data is they're changing every year based on the energy consumption, energy mix in the different areas and locations. So it's nothing which stays still. So whenever you want to make a new analysis, the data might change because the country has changed from having new renewable energies. So if you use old data, they're typically resulting in too high CO2 emissions compared, for example, some years ago. So you need to use quite fresh data to make it accurate. At the moment, the whole story for CO2 emission and CO2 footprint calculation started with getting transparency. Much more interesting and much more crucial in the future is the question of what will change in the future, how our CO2 values are changing based on processes, based on recycling rates, based on circularity. So when they work now on transparency, the next level and the next stage will be being able to simulate years in advance what happens in a new generation of a car, for example, or a system, how can they achieve the right CO2 values. So the forecast is the most crucial part of the CO2 data to use. Tset is as a solution with the most modern architecture, which means there's a potential that Tset can be an integrated system in the workflow of a product development until procurement. And if we are part of this seamless integration, then we are able to provide our data on the point where it's needed. And that's the only way where our data can be used completely in the right way if systems are digitalized in a work stream. And with Tset, we are very proud that we can work together because the architecture of Tset allows to integrate into systems. And that's the reason for us that the partnership with Tset is quite crucial. We are both in a very much startup dynamic way. We are exploring new ways of cost calculation, CO2 calculations. And I think that brings a quite nice partnership where we move fast, we decide fast, and we can grow fast together.